Good evening to anybody. I haven't done a live in a long time, so I decided now is a good time. I'm in California. They're in Southern California, so obviously there's an issue about the fire and the handling. I have my own opinions about it for whatever they're worth, which isn't very much, but for whatever I'm worth, I have my opinions on it, and I happen to be geographically relevant in terms of my location. So I figured I would kind of throw out some stuff, and maybe some of it would be interesting, and maybe it would be helpful for me, kind of to think it out as I go. I was born in LA. This sounds like a movie script. So I was born in LA. I'll do a quick GTII. I expect a report of the receiver probably next week. Within the next week. I know it's being worked upon. I haven't seen it, but I expect it'll come out probably the end of next week or so. That's what I'm informed. But that's secondhand. It's not firsthand, but that's what I'm informed. So that's what I expect. So that was GTII. So I grew up in LA. I remember fires my entire life. So I've seen fires. I grew up in the west side of Los Angeles. So the Palisades is on the west side, but it would be more coastal. I grew up near Century City, Rancho Park, which is the west side, but not as far west as the Palisades. So I would be probably around 6 miles to the beach from where I was. You would go through, from where I lived, you go down a street that would take you right to the beach in Santa Monica, directly down from where I was. And again, it was right next to 20th Century Fox Studios. But anyway, fires are pretty commonplace in LA. So I remember being in West LA as a kid and looking out the window into a mountain chain, which would have been, by the way, the Santa Monica Mountains, and being able to see fires and glows. So it was customary growing up in LA for fires. So nothing new. LA has a lot of brush and trees, and at times is very dry. As a result, and it's got a lot of topography. So there's a lot of hills. Where I live, for example, there's hills. So on those hills, sometimes it can be difficult for fire people to go up and down hills. The topography itself can be problematic. So, when you look at, and I'm sure all of you have seen pictures of the fires, etc. So the ironic thing is fire runs much faster uphill than downhill. So depending upon which side you are, and the reason why that is because as it goes uphill, it actually preheats it's in front of it, and so it goes faster. Even though it sounds counterintuitive, you would think it would run faster downhill, but it runs actually faster uphill. So in LA, Southern California, we have the topography, we have the plants. The plants can be very dry when there's no rain. For example, this year in the rainy season to date, we've had, I believe, 2/100ths of an inch, just a very small amount of rain. We usually have more than that. I think the normal amount is 3.3 inches, which for most locations in the country, it's a small amount. But for LA, it's sufficient to keep everything green in the wintertime, because we're in the wintertime. So topography, plants, the rain or lack thereof, and then of course the coup de grace is the wind. So that's always the X factor. So I've lived in LA area for over 60 years, and whenever there's a Santa Ana winds, I know there's a possibility that there could be a fire problem, and I hold my breath every time there is a Santa Ana wind condition. Santa Ana winds means that the winds are blowing in from the north to the ocean. The normal breeze is a prevailing wind from the Pacific inland, but when you have the Santa Ana winds, they come through the canyons, they come from the desert, they get kind of squeezed. As they get squeezed, they speed up and they heat up, and then when they come in, they dry, and they're really fast. So they come through mostly through canyons. And if you watch the fire and where there's a lot of wind activity, you'll see it's in the canyons because it's actually being funneled. So the wind is a really problematic if a fire gets started. And it's almost like, obviously we have no hurricanes or very few hurricanes in California. But when I watch a hurricane and there's a spray of water all over the place, when you see a fire going and let's say a tree goes up, those are what the embers look like, just like rain. So once the wind picks that up with the dry vegetation, with the topography, it is really difficult to stop a fire once it gets started. So the idea is to prevent them from starting. So anytime there's a high warning day, they issue a red flag warning. And for the current event, I think they went beyond that. They gave it like some special designation. Now, what's relevant about that is, and let me tell you where I live, just to kind of give you an idea. So I live next to, and you've probably heard some of these places now, I live near Calabasas. So if I turn my chair around, I would be facing towards the ocean. Right behind me is Malibu. That direction is Calabasas. What separates where I am from Malibu is the Santa Monica Mountains. And that's about less than a mile behind me. So on the other side of that, first you have the city that I'm in, and then comes into Malibu. So Malibu is about 2 or 3 miles from where I am, right behind me. So I saw this fire start, not directly, but I was in the city of Westlake Village, which is a city around this general vicinity, about 10:45 on Tuesday morning, and there was a marine layer. So like around the beach, you get a bunch of clouds, and it has a certain appearance. And something caught my eye, like this little dark area around the marine layer. I told somebody about it, and then I took a closer look, and I could see it was a problem. I knew it was going to be a problem because we had a red flag warning. This was going to be a big event, and it had just started. The event had just begun. So with experience at Southern California fires, my concern was if it was just the start of the Santa Anas, that there would be no way of dealing with it and it would get out of hand. Now, I never knew it was going to get out of hand to the extent it did, even though I've seen fires before around here. The location where I'm currently living, I've been there since 1991. It's a fire area. It's this area. We've had 2 fires where we were evacuated. 2 out of 34 years, I think. No, we've had this discussion, by the way. The fires kind of went around us. They were behind us. They were in front of us. We got evacuated. It was really kind of bizarre and disorienting. It was in the middle of the night, and you hear like a bullhorn come down your street, and you're woken up. Literally, I think the second time it was about 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. It's just very disorienting. And when you go outside, if it's in your locale, it's smoky. So it's frightening, honestly. I remember that. But we had 2 like that. No fire, though, has gotten to us. Although right behind me, there's a mountain called Ladyface Mountain. And on that mountain, during the Woolsey fire, which was the big fire that went through this area, went through Malibu in 2018, that particular mountain was burnt pretty heavily. It's regained most of its green over that time, almost to the bottom of the mountain. So it's been able to regenerate. But that's the area. So I saw it start. It got big, and so here are the problems. I'm not a big fan of the current mayor. I was not a big, and by the way, so not in the city of Los Angeles. I'm in the county of Los Angeles. So the city of Los Angeles is obviously in the county of Los Angeles. The county of Los Angeles is much bigger than the city of Los Angeles, has a much bigger population. There's a bunch of independent cities that are also part of the county of Los Angeles. So I'm in one of them. So I don't vote for the mayor of Los Angeles, but I do have a vote for like the supervisors of the county. But I'm not a big fan of Mayor Bass. I'm familiar with her because I'm familiar with her being in Congress. I just unimpressed. I don't think she has any particular skill or ability. I think her expertise was she was a physician's assistant at some point in time. So I was very unimpressed. I also was very, just to be honest, I was very unimpressed with the fire chief from of LA, and I heard her. She was discussing. They were asking her questions because there was an issue about water, and they were asking her about the issue about water and the hydrants, and she basically said, we can get by basically without the hydrants. Still a little bit of a problem, but whatever. It was the most ridiculous response I heard. By the way, the winds, the winds have been extreme, but the winds have been extreme at other times. It was kind of the location, I think, the timing, and the lack of water at some point in time. But the fire chief made the remark basically the water wasn't important. I found that kind of silly. She said that they could draft from like pools or toilets, which means literally they can pull water from a pool. Now, if you watch when they're trying to fight a fire, how much water it takes to put out even a house, it's an incredible amount of water. So if you're just drawing from a pool, you're just basically wasting water because you're not going to do much of anything. Anyway, when I saw that response, and then I saw her respond to a question, because at some point in time after the fire, when the smoke cleared, so to speak, when they showed the Palisades and they showed the picture of like 500 lots that were, it looked like a EF5 tornado, completely moonscaped. She became defensive. The fire chief became defensive. And what happened, which I found interesting, is today, apparently, she came out. The fire chief is Chief Crowley. At least she's the chief as of the moment we're speaking right now. Chief Crowley came out today and she was interviewed and she complained about the budget cuts that the mayor's office, I don't know if the mayor directly, but the mayor's office had made, and that had basically let down the fire department and had let down the city of LA and its inhabitants. So apparently tonight there was a meeting between the two, and the rumor is that the mayor asked the fire chief to either resign or step down, or she was reprimanded. And apparently there's firemen or firewomen who've communicated that to the news that that's going on, and they're concerned, and it's an issue. So in the midst of this crazy firestorm, and again, it was a crazy, crazy day, there's a dispute, or apparently a rift that has arisen between the clown mayor and the clown fire chief. And now the reason why I call him a clown, because again, I was very unimpressed with both of them. And I was having a conversation, no, I was sending a text to my son in New York. And I characterized, and this is before I knew about the meeting, and it was before the fire chief had said anything, but I called them both clowns. And I believe they both need to go. I mean, I think for various reasons. So apparently the fire chief acknowledged that she didn't know that the 113 million gallon reservoir in the Palisades was empty. So they couldn't draw upon that. Now, maybe it wasn't her responsibility for it to being filled, but it's certainly her responsibility for not knowing it wasn't filled. You would think that would be a relevant point to know. So the other issue is the fire hydrants. So the fire hydrants stopped working. By the way, they literally stopped using fire hydrants at some point in time. The reason why they stopped using the fire hydrants, and they say that you can only use it for some amount of time and then it runs out. Okay, that's a bad answer, number one, because if that's your kind of your solution, we're going to hope we don't run out of water. That's your solution. I really don't think that's a great solution, because that sounds like a defeatist mode. So you got to have some alternative ways of bringing water in that are not trucks and like 1,700 gallons in a plane. But what happened additionally is in the Palisades, they have these 3 large tanks. Each of those tanks are 1 million gallons. Those tanks service the hydrants. 1 million gallons sounds like a lot of water, and it is a lot of water. But when you're fighting a fire of that scope, 1 million gallons goes fast. And when they run out of water, they have pumps to pump water back in to those tanks. So the tanks then can service the fire hydrants. Well, there was too much demand on the water, so they couldn't get the water back in the tanks. But on top of that, there was electric pumps. And because they have this practice now, and it's seemingly a smart practice. By the way, I hear fire trucks in the background. I don't know if you can hear them, because there's a fire. Do you hear that? Maybe you can hear the fire truck. There's the Kenneth fire is about 3 miles that way. Anyway, so the pump relies upon electricity. They have this, and again, they have a policy that and they've learned this because a lot of times power lines cause fires, and if they de-electrify the power lines, then they're concerned the winds are going to knock down power lines, and if they make those power lines not have any juice in them, then they figure there won't be any fires caused. So what they have, some program, I presume, some computer program, some algorithm that spits out areas that are at risk, and it shuts off the power. Unfortunately, it also shuts off the power to the pumps. So you can't pump the water back up to those tanks. And because of both that reservoir being empty, that had 113 million gallons, or normally did, because they didn't kind of figure out that the pumps were a problem, and they needed, if they were going to, this was going to be a big event. This was talked about probably for 10 days beforehand. So they were aware this was going to be a big event. If they were aware it was going to be a big event, if they were aware that they might have to shut power in certain areas, then they should have gotten pumps as backups, because eventually they did, so they could have, but they didn't. So they ended up with no water. So not having water, and for a day or two you can't fly because there's too much smoke, and it smokes straight up, and it takes a while to get all the aircraft around, and it's hard to fly. I think also because of the color of the ocean, especially in the Palisades, that if you're flying, it's difficult to get a orientation. So for all those reasons, and because it's not safe, they don't fly. So you'd have no aircraft, and those aircraft really suppress the fire. No aircraft, no water, makes it a pretty difficult go for the firemen. And the firemen are amazing. They've gone for, they go forever. I think they were talking about they were going on 36-hour shifts straight. That work is amazingly difficult. How do I know that? Have I ever been a fireman? No, never been a fireman, although there was a fire station about 1,000 yards that way where they have strike teams posted whenever there's a red flag. So I see firemen all the time right over there, and they were there. They're there, and they have they hang out there. It's a centralized place. I'm glad it's near my home. But once I was an extra in a movie, living in Hollywood, of course. I was an extra in a movie. I was a fireman, and I was on a fire truck, and I was fully dressed. I had an axe. I had an air tank. I had all the gear. I was in my 20s. I was in good shape at that time. And I thought that was extremely difficult. And that was some stupid movie, which I don't remember the name of in my great movie career. But they do an amazing job. So whatever I'm saying, my critique about management, I'm saying, has nothing to do with the firemen themselves and the firewomen, because I think they do a wonderful job. I think they were undermanned, and one of the issues that came up by the fire chief was the mayor's office made cuts, and so I think $17 million in cuts. And there's a question of it may not have, it certainly wouldn't have stopped the fire, but perhaps if you have that extra money, you don't end up with a miscommunication about an empty reservoir. Maybe you have the pumps. Maybe you have other strategies. Maybe you do something else. Let me throw another thing in there. So we have like a dispute pending involving the mayor and the fire chief. When this all started, and again, I'm not a big fan of Bass going in. I think I was just, again, very unimpressed with her history, with her competence, with her skill set. We heard about the weather patterns, probably like for 10 days before this event, because they said it was going to be like a strong, very strong Santa Ana. That's kind of what we give the title of those kind of events. And then at the end, they changed it to like an extremely extreme event, which was a new title. But when she left, the mayor went to Ghana, I think a day or two before this happened, after it was known that this was going to be an extreme event. She went to Ghana not for the city of LA, but to be in a U.S. delegation, because she has a very close relationship to Biden, because apparently she was a potential candidate for VP if Kamala Harris had not been VP, apparently. So she has a very close relationship with the current president, and she's on a U.S. delegation to Ghana. So to go to a wedding of some dignitary in Ghana, that's why she went to Ghana. Nothing to do with the city of LA. I don't think sometimes mayors take these trips, these boondoggles, but at least they go somewhere and they're promoting their city or whatever. This was not even that. She was going, I think, because she was kissing Biden's ass, to be honest, and she was going to be a dignitary in a wedding ceremony. Again, not for the city of LA. And she was aware of this weather event. And she still didn't leave, by the way, when the event was determined to be this extreme event. But prior to its actually breaking out, and prior to me seeing it, she didn't come back. She came back much later. That's why in the initial press conferences, she's not there. And those press conferences pissed the hell out of me. They've done them every day. They do them multiple times a day, and up till today, all they did was congratulate each other for the great job that they've done. The great job in which they have lost maybe 15,000 structures. In the Palisades, I'm familiar with that area. I've driven down Sunset to the beach. I don't know if you have all driven down there, but there's a lot of homes in that area. It's very, in the past, because I grew up on that side of town. I think I mentioned that. So often, my friends and I, we drive to the beach that way, down Sunset or Wilshire or whatever. That area is very pretty, kind of very green for LA, at least in the right time of year. And there's tons of homes. The LA Open is played there at Riviera Country Club, so you may have seen that on TV. It's a beautiful layout. And I think if you went there now, it would look like, literally, again, like an EF5 tornado hit it. So the mayor was gone. There wasn't water. The reservoir was empty. They didn't have the pumps. There's now a disagreement between the mayor and the fire chief. Apparently the fire personnel are uncomfortable now that the police chief, the fire chief, has either been asked to resign or been reprimanded. The last election, the mayoral election, when Bass was elected, there was a gentleman by the name of Rick Caruso who was the opponent. Again, I don't vote in that election. It was a relatively close election. He's a real estate developer. He's developed shopping centers. They're kind of like low level. The Grove. If you've been to L.A., the Grove in the middle of the city, that's his project, for example. But he also has a project in the Palisades, and I think when they were showing the shopping areas, it was his place that he had built. Anyway, he was a mayoral candidate, and he's a pro-growth developer. He wants to build apartments and housing because housing is very short in LA. But he lost, and I think it was a relatively close election. But he lost. It wasn't so close, but it was relatively close. LA is a relatively democratic city, but there's a lot of. As of today, there's a lot of dissatisfaction with the government, the local city government. To kind of like put a little spin on that, yesterday. So there's a new fire, that Kenneth fire, 2 miles that way. And the wind is kind of blowing this way. So theoretically, it could come here, where I am. And all of a sudden, they send out a alert. And what they do is on your phone, if there's an evacuation order, you'll get it on your phone. Theoretically, you get it on the phone, and theoretically, it will be accurate. So when they evacuated for that fire, which was near Calabasas, or kind of went into Calabasas, it was in an area called Hidden Hills near that. Everybody in Los Angeles County got an evacuation order. Everybody. So it wasn't anybody near the evacuation area, but everybody got one. So apparently everybody freaked out. Now I got it, but I was watching, literally, I was there. I don't mean I was in the fire, but I was probably within a mile of the fire because I was trying to keep track of its position relative to where I was. It was pretty amazing. I figured, they were going to jump on it really quickly, and they did, but it's just down the street. So I find it very disconcerting about the relationship between the mayor and the fire chief. Getting back to Caruso Caruso built the thing in the Palisades. I think most of it survived. He was the mayoral candidate. He's already come out, by the way, and criticized Bass for being in Ghana and for being unprepared with the water issues, the reservoir, the pumps. I guess not having the manpower, because I guess if you thought it was going to be an extreme weather event, and I've never heard of that, by the way, you probably should have prepared better than you did, obviously prepared better than you did. So she's been in the office of mayor up to this point in time. There's a huge amount of discontent in the city of LA. I've heard it today. So I'm hoping that she gets recalled or resigns. I think that would be the appropriate thing, would be for her to leave, because if that area needs to be rebuilt, who better than Caruso, the developer, who was going to be the mayor, or was the next mayor candidate, next one up, who knows that area? Who better to lead the rebuilding of that area? And by the way, I think that because there's an issue about insurance, there's a huge issue about homeowners insurance in Southern California, almost impossible to get. So I had farmers insurance for, the state provides some level of insurance if you can't get it elsewhere, but it's really expensive and it's crappy. So when I first moved into my home in 1991, I couldn't get normal insurance because I was considered to be in a fire area. A couple years later, that for whatever reason, farmers insurance picked me up. They insured me until about a year and a half ago. About a year and a half ago, they said they might consider insuring me, but I had to remove any vegetation, any and all vegetation within, I think, 6 feet or 7 feet of my home. By the way, which was an impossibility. I couldn't do it even if I chose. That would be like removing these large trees. And they did it. They gave you the option to do that so that they couldn't be accused of terminating people, but it was basically termination. So I got another insurance, but I couldn't find one in the state of California. So I had to get an out-of-state one. It's cost me about another what does it cost me? I think fire insurance for my house. My house, because it's Southern California, it's not because it's a huge mansion or anything. But my house is 7 figures, and the insurance is about 10,000 a year for fire insurance. That doesn't include earthquake insurance. If you couldn't get it there, you can get it from the state, but the state would be much more expensive, and their limits are really low. So there's an issue about getting insurance. And if you have a house, if you're going to build a new house, if you're going to get a construction loan, if you don't have insurance, it's a tough row to hoe. And I don't, although logically speaking, the best time for an insurance company to write insurance would be now. Because they could go into the Palisades and they could write insurance in that area, and the odds of them having to pay a claim on new construction would be low because everything that is going to burn is already burned. But they are reluctant to insure in Southern California. I think in Florida probably too, and other places where they have a lot of natural disasters. So new construction, wherever it's going to be done in fire areas, has to be different. It can't just keep on rebuilding the same, because the problem in Southern California is we have earthquakes too. So in the East Coast, you can build stone, things like that, stuff that won't burn. In the West Coast, all along the West Coast, you have to have wood because you need a flexibility that during an earthquake, the building can move and not break. So if you have a stone building, and that's happened, the masonry buildings, often they break. The stone literally breaks because it doesn't move. But that wood, that element burns. That's the issue. And if you looked along the Malibu coast, there are some houses that are just concrete, and those houses, or some of them, survived. It is really bizarre to me, by the way, that in Malibu, because I'm very familiar with that area, that houses on the beach side and restaurants and businesses did not survive. That is so bizarre. And again, I think I mentioned, fire runs much faster uphill than downhill. So that's coming downhill to Pacific Coast Highway. So that's kind of going the slower way. But I think what they said is a lot of things that happened was there'd be a power pole or a phone pole would catch fire. It would fall over. It would fall across Pacific Coast Highway. It would hit a house on the beach side of Pacific Coast Highway between like the Palisades and Malibu. The houses are pretty close together. If one starts, then there's a pretty good amount of activity, by the way. I don't know if you can hear it. There's a pretty good amount of activity. That's the fire in Calabasas, I believe, that they're dealing with it. But those poles would fall over, they'd start the other side, and then they would burn. There's a bunch of restaurants that burn, but it really, and nobody's allowed in there, so I haven't seen it. But I can only imagine that it's really confusing to the brain to see the ocean and then see burnt out, because I've seen pictures, just stubs. So I believe that things have to be built differently. And beyond that, the technology for fighting fires sucks. And, I believe, because I've been here a long time, that's the firefighters in Southern California, because they have to have a lot of experience because they do it, are great. But their tools suck. Really. You got to rely upon a bunch of planes dumping some water from the air, a bunch of chemicals, the FOS check. And I've seen that before because there's trucks. There's probably trucks in this neighborhood right now. They put that red stuff in a truck and somehow they pump it into a plane and the plane takes it up. And then you'll see them drop a line. And it really does stop the fire from crossing. You could have embers that would fly still across, but it does stop. But you have those kind of very archaic. I kind of equate it to air travel. When I was a kid, if you took a plane, it took you the same amount of time as it does today, same speed. It's absurd. So in today's, I can't imagine. Are we gonna? And I was thinking about. So what can you do? You can have certainly different kind of chemicals that you can use that suppress fires better than water and what they use. You could certainly, I know Elon Musk, right, and the robots, right. So there's, I guess that's an industry that will be moving forward. I could see fire robots. So you have a whole fleet of robots that go out there and are able to fight fires, and maybe they have a particular shield that lets them last. But you could make millions of those, and they could go out in literally. Maybe you could train them to fight fires. I seem to think you probably could do that, and I'm sure there's much better ideas than that. But I can't imagine that there's not better technology than some plane. And by the way, we have two of those big scoopers. So they go out in the helicopters go out like to wherever they see water and they'll fill up. But they have these planes that can scoop up, I think about 2,000 gallons. They go out into the ocean, they pick up seawater and they scoop it up and they go back. And they were delivering Palisades, I think yesterday or a day before. But yesterday, one of them, we only have two, and they're from Canada, by the way, on loan. One of them struck a drone and had to be grounded. So, which I think is absurd. By the way, I think the drone operators, we have enough problems with drones, right? I think anybody who operates a drone around an airport or any other area that is dangerous should face a felony. I mean, because if not, because what happened was that drone struck that one of those two planes. The plane didn't know that when it landed, it had a big hole in its wing and is grounded. And I just don't believe that we have great. And this is a little far afield, but it happened to involve these fires and probably impacted how long these fires are going to last, because those planes are very effective. But I think we have to have increased penalties for people who fly drones in areas that are obviously dangerous. Because if we don't, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. There's going to be an accident and a loss of life. It's just a matter of time. You all know it. I mean, with all the amount of drones that are out there now, and with it seemingly, to me, seems like we have no idea where they are or what kind they are, who's flying it. It could be the guy next door to me, by the way, just having his jollies, but we have no control over that. And I don't know that those people have such great skill level to know what they're doing. Anyway, we need penalties with regard to that. The other thing is, there's looting going on. So they've arrested a bunch of looters, and there's gangs of criminals at times that have invaded Southern California from various countries, and there's crime native to the area also. And I don't know who these were, but there was a bunch of people that were looting, and they were arrested. I guess 20 of them were arrested. There were 20 arrests or so. At least there were at some point in time. I also believe that anybody who loots after a natural disaster should face some additional punishment, because that is just like the lowest of the low, wherever it happens. If there's a tornado and people go in and they steal stuff, I just think that is the most disgusting conduct, taking advantage of people who have been harmed. I just think they should face the ramifications. So we have a new DA. I guess LA County. We have a new DA, and he says he's going after these people. And I guess the National Guard came in last night. They're in Santa Monica and other places. So the fire in the Palisades, just to give you a size, because LA is a big area. So the Palisades is not a huge chunk of LA, but the Palisades, the footprint of the fire, because it covers the Palisades and part of Malibu, the footprint of that fire is much larger now than Manhattan, the entire island, just to kind of give you an idea of the footprint and the size. And that's just a chunk of LA. So they have to deal with that. And probably 30 miles from there, maybe more, is Altadena. You've heard where that other fire is, I think it's the Eaton fire. That's quite a distance. And those are on opposite ends. Those are going on at the same time. And obviously you have to split up resources. There's a shortage of resources. There's a shortage of airplanes. They have to decide where the planes go. And literally, because I'm near a water and a place where they go to Camarillo sometimes I think at night when they come back and forth. So at night, and I'm probably here tonight, I heard it last night, you'll hear helicopters at 3:00 in the morning. They're doing drops all night because that's when the fire is laid down and they can influence it a lot. All right. So I've said about a billion things here. I talked about the drone. I talked about the police chief. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the fire chief. I hope the mayor steps down. I hope that Caruso replaces her. The Olympics are coming up in 2028. 2028. Yeah, 2028. I think it's 2028. The Olympics are coming on. I think it makes much more sense for Caruso to be the mayor of LA than Bass. I think she's horrendous. I think she's incompetent. What else can I say? I think the problem is at this point in time, I think both the mayor and the fire chief are exuding zero confidence, so that when the city and the citizens look at them, they don't feel like they have their back. They don't feel like they're taking care of things. And again, this is an extreme situation. Can't stop it from happening, but you certainly could do a much better job managing it. Could have been much more aware of the limitations, and you could have been aware of the water issue, could have been aware of the pump issue. You could have pre-positioned more equipment and personnel. You could have brought it in from elsewhere. You shouldn't have stayed out of the country. The budget cut is an issue. Whether it overall impacted the department, it certainly impacted morale. There's no way. We have the insurance issue, but we also have weather conditions that are going to continue. So we are in a weather period called La Nina. We have El Nino. I'm sure you've heard of that. And La Nina. For us, generally, for El Nino, we get more rain. For La Nina, we get less rain. We're in a La Nina, so we got very little rain. Part of that setup is we get those winds, those particular Santa Ana winds, because that's where the systems, whatever systems come out, whatever low systems, they kind of set up in a pattern where they create that wind. So since we're in a La Nina year, we're more prone to get these type of wind events. We're supposed to have wind tomorrow. Not as bad, obviously, as what happened last week, but enough, if there's an open fire that's going, enough to whip it up, because it's being whipped up tonight, because it's being pushed. Probably, I think they'll be able to manage it. But if you look down on the TV, it looks ridiculous. It looks, much more frightening on TV, because these fire people have a great amount of skill. There's a lot of people on the ground. They have a lot of equipment, bulldozers, a lot of people just walking, stamping out fires. There's a lot of it's pretty amazing operation, but it's really difficult. It requires a lot of labor. And again, I can only imagine. Come on, you're telling me that's the best technology you have to deal with fires. It's pathetic, really. I think, again, if somebody's going out of, somebody goes to space, they probably have to make sure there's no fires, and they probably have to deal with them, make sure there's ways of dealing with them in the future when we go to other planets. They're really going to have to be careful about that. Perhaps technology will improve, but like relying upon, some water tank for a certain amount of time. Again, literally, I heard excuses saying that after about 4 hours, if you're going like full bore on those hydrants, they're going to run out of water. I don't know if that's true of all cities, but if that's true of all cities, I find that a really scary proposition, because there's no way of knowing that you might need more than like all out 4 hours of water. We've seen that. I like I said, when I got evacuated in the Woolsey fire in 2018, that just rolled all the way from Box Canyon, which is a area in the northern San Fernando Valley, all the way to Malibu, to the ocean. Again, no excuse. Incompetent management. They got to go, and they got to go now before more harm is caused. And I don't just mean harm to the morale, but literally more harm to more people. Because again, the competency of management, the mayor and the soon-to-be ex-fire chief, I just think they're both clowns. And the agency who put out those false, I mentioned that. So we got one false evacuation order, and then about 4:00 in the morning, another false evacuation order. And then I saw on the news this morning early that people were frightened because they sent out these evacuation orders to people not anywhere near a fire. They didn't understand what was going on, and people freaked out. And it came up today, and the management, again, that I'm referring to, they just kind of poo-pooed it. But the problem is, apparently, a lot of people now are going to ignore the emergency alerts. They've turned them off. There's a way you could turn them off. That's because of incompetence. I mean, the first thing I would do is I'd fire whoever's in charge of that, because apparently those alerts go out. Think about this. When I hear this, I find it amazing. Those alert. So LA County has over 10 million people, and those alerts can go out to all of LA County. That alert goes out without anybody seeing it first. So it's sent. Nobody sees it, and then it's out. So I got at least 2 of those. Apparently, there were people who got like 5 or 6 of them, of false alerts. And again, can you imagine this? The point of those alert systems is to keep people out of harm's way. But they've misused it so much, or they didn't test it enough, or the person who's responsible doesn't know what they're doing, that it didn't work, and now people will ignore it. First thing I've given you my list of people that need to go. Bass, Crowley, that's the chief. The person responsible for the emergency management system got to go. I mean, if they don't resign tonight, they got to go. You can't have the risk to the community. Those people are ridiculous. You just need competency, some level of competency. Let's see. Anything else I want to rant about this? I've been ranting the whole time. The maximum water really kind of annoyed me when they were saying that they can only run the fire hydrants, and at some point in time they literally stopped relying. They said this. They stopped relying upon the fire hydrants. What they did is they would only rely upon, they'd bring in trucks. They have these trucks that bring in water. They might bring in a lot of water, like 4,000 gallons. That's just a little nothing in the amount of water that's been used to fight these fires. Anyway, let's see. Anything else I wanted to rant about? I think there needs to be management change now. I think, really, if you're in the city of LA, you should recall. If the mayor doesn't resign, recall. Otherwise, um, you know, next election, change. If I hear anything else, I'll let you know. Keep an ear out for the fire chief. See if she gets can. Ordinary angler GTII. I did it really quickly at the start. I'll do it quickly at the end. Spoke to counsel for the receiver. They're working on the report. Should come out. I'm guessing. Sounded like end of next week, something like that. So that should. I don't know any details about what's in the report or anything like that, since it's not me. But I expect it to have a lot of information and to give us update as to what's going on. Again, I'm just a guy. I don't represent anybody. I don't have any special position. So I do ask. I mean, I've asked, obviously, what's going on. But anyway, I expect a report next week. So that will give us an update. We'll find out what the receiver's been up to. We'll find out where we are. That's about it. So I hope that answers your question. What else do I wanted to say? I think that's about it. When I have some more info to report about the fire, because again, it's kind of very close to here. We did. Oh, I buried the lead. We did get we eventually did get a real evacuation order last night, but it eventually was canceled. We didn't leave. We just prepared. I didn't really think we were going to have to leave. At some point in time, like anything else, you kind of get used to it. And I was literally watching the fire, so I kind of had a good idea. And if you watch a fire on TV, it always looks much closer to wherever the geography is than it actually is. Just the optical illusion, like when you're looking at an ocean or something like that, or a mountain, it looks much closer than it is. So I feel bad for everybody out there who, if you lose your home, I can only imagine. I've spoke to that with my wife because we lived here for 33 years. We've made it. We've kind of like skipped out. We've had two that were, close to, that we had to get evacuated, really evacuated. But we've talked about, at least I've talked about, she doesn't want to. I've talked about moving because I think we're rolling the dice. We've been lucky to this point in time, but we're kind of rolling the dice. By the way, Governor, I despise. By the way, if you looked at my politics, you'd be surprised at some of my statements. I hate the governor also. I'm no fan of his. I think he should keep in mind that notwithstanding whatever his differences with Trump, that he doesn't want to be on the bad side and doesn't want California to get screwed more than it might get screwed. If he ends up his anti, I don't see how that helps Californians. So if you got a problem, if you got a personal problem, then keep it aside. Don't use the citizens of California as your fodder. So that pisses me off, and I think he's a terrible governor. By the way, I think he's I'm not a fan of most politicians, so I just throw him in the garbage can with the rest. I hope he goes. I think he's not a helpful guy. One of the issues in California is the water, and it's not just him. This is a long thing. Why we haven't built systems retaining water. There's no, in Los Angeles, for example, I think it's like 90%, might be more than 90%. When there's a rain event, the water, and we get very little rain. We get about, on an average year, 14 inches of rain in the LA area, where I live, slightly more. But it's something like more than 90%, maybe 95% of all the water that comes down from rain goes into the ocean. Doesn't get caught, doesn't go into a reservoir, nothing. And I don't know what the government spends money on. Certainly not sufficient number of reservoirs or other ways. I don't know why there's not desalination plants up and down the entire coast of California. There are some. I think there's one in San Diego that provides a lot of water. I think elsewhere, it's usually an environmental issue, but I think water, it's probably the most sensible You have a pretty big ocean. There's a lot of water in that ocean. I think a lot of water. I think you should have desalination plants up and down the coast. And again, these are all new technologies. You can make new technologies. You can make new industries, just like the fire prevention industries. If you got a problem, cure the problem, create the technology, make it a business, and take advantage of it. God, it pisses me off. Again, been in California a long time. I love the geography. The geography of California, there's no place like it. I am where I am about 13 minutes from the beach. When I wake up and I open my front door, I have this green hill right in front of me. The desert is not far. You can get to the mountains probably like 75 minutes, and there's sometimes snow. So the geography of California, and we get earthquakes too. So we have earthquake faults too, and all that kind of stuff. Got the ocean. It's amazing geography, but it has plenty of issues, and it's got bad management. And not always, it hasn't always had bad management. Has bad management now. So I can keep on ranting, but I won't. I did mention, just the people who are here for GTII, I did mention I'm expecting, because I spoke to the attorney for the receiver, probably the end of next week for the receiver's report. I presume there will be essential information in it, but I have not seen it, nor do I know the contents. Nor just so you're clear about that, nor did they disclose the contents to me before they put it out. So that's kind of the way it goes. I'm just kind of nosy. I know them, so and I'm a plaintiff in the case that's in Nevada. So I stick my nose in, I try to find out, and when I find out, whatever. I know, I could add this one thing. I know that they recently, because it was ex parte, I might as well mention this, because it's interesting. I learned this today. Ex parte, so without notice, that Reichman's counsel apparently went in to try to get rid of the receiver again about a week ago, and their request was denied. So they've been unsuccessful. So the judge has responded to critiques of the receiver by keeping the receiver. So from the judge's perspective, and again, the receiver is an agent of the judge and the court. He's not an agent. He's not like my agent. He doesn't act for me. So it's the judge who calls the shots, the judge who has to sign off on everything. And so that's where we are with GTII. Expect a report. I'm sure there'll be information. And then when I get that, then I will follow up and we'll go over the report. So that's all I have to ramble about. Follow out. Let's see what happens to the fire chief. Let's see if I'm correct that the fire chief gets canned or resigns. Let's see what happens with the mayor. Let's see what happens to Rick Caruso. Keep that name in mind. And the person running the emergency alert system, the water. I felt bad there was a woman who was in charge of the water. She had to, and that first day she was getting the brunt, probably appropriately getting the brunt. But there's been so many issues. There are just so many issues that has to suggest incompetency at a grand scale. Anyway, one last thing. I found this kind of like really concerning. So there's an issue about insurance, and you've heard that there's a question about whether there's arson fires. So I think the concern is that the insurance companies are going to try to claim that these are arson fires. Why would they want to claim there were arson fires? One, the policies. So if let's say I have an insurance policy, some Mr. X sets a fire in downtown Los Angeles. That fire burns all the way to where I am, and it destroys my house. Some policies have a specific exclusion for arson. Almost all policies have an exclusion for intentional misconduct. So there's a concern And this is, you can only imagine, because the losses in the Palisades alone, honestly, that is going to be the biggest loss in the history of the United States. That's got to be, well over $200 billion. Those are really expensive houses. Um, I'm not going to be shocked if the insurance companies deny a lot of these claims on the basis of arson, intentional acts. Can you imagine, you buy a fire policy, something happens miles away from you, it burns your house down, you have not done anything intentionally to cause that fire, and the insurance company denies your claim? I mean, and with the amount of claims that are going to come in, because some of these insurance companies, I think there were three main insurance companies that have the Palisades. Um, I don't know. I don't think they're going to be able to manage those claims themselves. There's going to be money. I don't know where the money's going to come from, but I'm sure the money will come from somewhere. But initially, can you imagine, you lose your house, you make your claim to your insurance company? It's terrible, by the way. And to all of you out there who lost your house from whatever event, it's terrible. So you're in a state of, shock, whatever. Eventually, you get your sorts about you. You then make your claim to your insurance company so you can rebuild your house. They deny the claim. Do you have to then litigate that? Do you have to file a lawsuit and wait for years? Does have some class action have to be filed? Does the government have to get involved, force the insurers to pay? What's going to happen? It's going to be a terrible issue. And the issue with the arson intentional conduct, I'm really concerned about that. And it would be really unfair, because people get insurance, like fire insurance. You get fire insurance to protect you against a fire. I understand if you start your own fire, like if you burn your own store down and you burn your own house down, okay, I get that. You shouldn't get coverage for that. But if some guy um, burns something and it burns your house down 10 miles away, that really makes me uncomfortable. That could be a real problem. Let's see how that works out. But I could see that as a real problem. It really concerns me. Should concern anybody who's involved in a fire loss. So anyway, besides that, nothing's new. Everybody be well. Take care of yourself. When I have more to talk about the fire chief and GTII and whatever else, I'll do another live. Maybe tomorrow. We'll see if there's maybe if the fire chief is gone tomorrow or there's some new change. Anyway, everybody out there, be well. Take care. Those of you in the Southland, take care of yourself. We'll see you soon. And that's it.